Welcome to the Temple of the Living God here in beautiful St. Petersburg. It's a great day outside. This is the place to be in December, I'm telling you. There's just no place better. And it's a week before Christmas, so we're going to do a little Christmas number here to start the day off. Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will save our sons and daughters? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you delivered will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know that your baby boy will give sight to a blind man? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will calm the storm with his hand? Did you know that your baby boy has walked where angels trod? And when you kiss your little baby, you kiss the face of God. The blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dead will live again. The lame will leap, the dumb will speak, the praises of the Lamb. Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day rule the nations? Did you know that your baby boy is heaven's perfect lamb? And this sleeping child you're holding is the great I am. Mary, did you know?
And it is my distinct pleasure today to welcome our friend back. Many of you remember John Seibert, who now shares his time between here and Costa Rica. I asked him how big his suitcase was. Not quite big enough, but thank you for even considering it. And we are delighted to have you with us today, and we look forward to your talk coming up shortly. I found for this morning a very short work by a man born 120 years ago in Texas, a newspaper reporter, editor, biographer, and novelist who had several of his works published, but whose name I never heard before, Orrin Arnold. It's titled simply Christmas Gifts, and it evoked for me the spirit of the day. To your enemy, forgiveness. An opponent, tolerance. A friend, your heart. A customer, service. Every child, a good example. To all, charity. to yourself, respect. And now we all look forward to more beautiful holiday music. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you make available to us.
Child of peace, child of peace, sure and sweet. Show me how to be a child of peace. When a child is born, they bring a gift of peace, an offering from the universe for all to see. In my heart there is a space, set pure and sacred, warm and safe, where the child of peace lives in me. Child of peace, pure and sweet. Show me how to be a child of peace. So the seeds of peace are sown in fields of hope where love is grown. Now into the light has come, heaven's work will soon be done, and every soul that's born will love increase. So anytime you see a child, greet them with a loving smile. Give your heart to the child of peace. Child of peace, pure and sweet. Show me how to be a child of peace. Child of peace, pure and sweet. Show me how to be a child of peace.
Thank you for that wonderful musical selection. And good morning to everybody. As always, it's a real treat for me to be back here at the temple, especially during this Christmas season. And today I'm going to do something I have never done before here. I'm going to represent a talk that I've previously given here. In December of 2013, 9 years ago, Reverend Zemke asked me if I could speak about the Buddhist perspective of Christmas. And I thought, gee, how could I better do that than talk about a Buddhist perspective on a Christmas favorite, which is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And that's what I'm going to do today. And so, to begin with A Christmas Carol, let's begin with, of course, we know the principal characters, and of course the main character was one Ebenezer Scrooge. And Dickens begins his novella by describing Scrooge as a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. So, as we probably know if you've seen the film, and I'm sure you have, or read the novella, the story takes place on Christmas Eve in London in the 1840s. And it starts off in Scrooge's little cramped, dark, dank office where he is hunched over a desk with a dimly lit candle. And it must be very cold in that office because he has a coat on and a scarf on. And off to his side is his clerk, Bob Cratchit, also hunched over his little desk, dimly lit by one candle, and he has his coat and he has his scarf on. It looks like a very unhappy place, and it is. But all of a sudden, a very bright, jovial man enters. It is Scrooge's nephew, Fred. And Fred is there to invite his Uncle Scrooge to the family's annual Christmas celebration the following day. And Scrooge says, as he says often in this novella, "Bah humbug, why do I want to waste my time on Christmas Day of all things when I could be here doing work and making money? No." Well, nephew Fred leaves the invitation open. Now Bob Cratchit, with some amount of timidness, asks Scrooge if he could have the day off tomorrow to be with his family. Scrooge, of course, kind of begrudgingly understands he probably does have to give this guy the day off, but not without another lecture about what a worthless, ridiculous endeavor it is to be somewhere else when you can be here at the office making money. But he tells Cratchit, okay, just make sure you're back here extra early the day after Christmas, and Scrooge leaves the office. Now, on his way back home, Scrooge runs into several businessmen on the street who are soliciting people to give alms to the poor. They solicit Scrooge. Scrooge, as you might expect, goes, "What? Why should I give alms to those people? What have they done for me? What are they going to do for me? Bah humbug, no." Off goes Scrooge to his home. So, what might be the Buddhist perspective on all of this? Well, from their perspective, Scrooge is a very, very unhappy person. And why is that? This goes back to one of the fundamental teachings of Buddha about how we can make ourselves happy. And for those of you who have not heard me speak before, I will simply say I enjoy speaking about the non-religious teachings of Buddha that have to do with our mind and how it can be one that will make us very unhappy, but also how we can retrain it to make ourselves happy. The principal teaching of Buddha was that all of our happiness and all of our unhappiness comes from our minds and not from the things that are going on around us. And that what we need to do is recognize that there is something really nasty going on in our minds called self-cherishing, which is something we were born with. And it's this perception, this erroneous perception that we are just a little bit better than everybody else. And therefore, things should happen in a way that please us, or at least cause us to feel neutral. And when that doesn't happen, when people, things, or situations unfold in ways that are not what we were expecting, or that upset our perception that we're a little bit better than everyone else, we become unhappy in a variety of ways. And so Buddha's point was, if you can find a way to dial back your self-cherishing, what happens? Automatically, your level of happiness will increase. So he gave many, many teachings on how to retrain your mind to decrease the amount of self-cherishing it has. And we'll talk about some of that this morning. But from a Buddhist perspective, Scrooge is somebody who has allowed his self-cherishing to run amok. And as a consequence, he has nothing but a feeling of unhappiness about everything. So that's where we start off from a Buddhist perception of A Christmas Carol. Now, at this point, we also learn that Scrooge had a former business partner by the name of Jacob Marley, who was just as miserly as Scrooge, and who died 7 years ago on Christmas Eve. Okay, I'll get back to Jacob Marley in a second. So Scrooge gets home, he finally prepares for bed, locks his bedroom door, slides that slide bolt shut, gets into bed, closes those Victorian bed curtains all around him. Now he's nice and cozy in bed, but he hears a noise. The door is being unlocked. He had locked it from the inside. He peeks out through the bed curtains. He doesn't see anybody, tries to go back to sleep, and all of a sudden he hears a noise again. And now he sees the apparition, the ghost of Jacob Marley. He is very scared. Marley's head is wrapped in bandages. His body is wrapped in these chains that hold cash boxes and ledgers and deeds and all sorts of padlocks and other instruments of making money in a rather unfortunate way. And he looks at Scrooge, and he gives Scrooge a warning. Before I get to that warning, though, what's the Buddhist perception or perspective on Marley? Are they surprised at the way he looks? No. Now we're getting into the religious aspect of Buddhism, and certainly from the Tibetan perspective, which is what I study. We all have lived an infinite number of lives. We will all live an infinite number of future lives. And when we move from one life to another, we may or may not stay in the same realm that we are currently in. We are now in the human realm. There are better realms above us. There are not so good realms below us. Not all that different than Christianity. And one of the realms below us is something called the hungry ghost realm, which is an area, a realm of perpetual unhappiness, sorrow, agony, regret, on and on and on. They will see that Jacob Marley is in the hungry ghost realm. So I said Marley comes to warn Scrooge. What does he warn Scrooge about? He warns Scrooge, shape up. Otherwise, you're going to end up like me, because I wear the chains that I forged in life. Now, from a Buddhist perspective, this is significant because Marley is trying to do something good. He's trying to help his friend Scrooge. And in Buddhism, much like in the metaphysical world, there is a belief in karma. If we do meritorious acts, we generate good karma. If we do non-meritorious acts, we generate bad karma. Karma eventually ripens into either good things for us or bad things for us. And from the Buddhist perspective, that can happen in this lifetime, or it could happen in some future lifetime down the road. And our karmic account, if you will, the good and the bad, is what goes with us when we go from one realm to the next after we leave a realm, that is to say, die. And the amount of good karma we have versus bad will determine what realm we are going to go into. And when you are in a lower realm, it is very hard from a Buddhist perspective to do anything good that is going to generate positive karma that you can rely on to lift you up into a higher realm. But here is Marley doing something very good, generating positive karma for himself, which means just maybe the next time around for him, when it's time to move on to another realm, he could come back up. Maybe not quite as high as the human realm, but he'll be going in the right direction. So the last thing that Marley tells Scrooge, he said he's going to be visited by 3 ghosts during the night. Marley disappears. When the clock strikes 1, all of a sudden the first ghost appears, the ghost of Christmas past. And the ghost of Christmas past takes Scrooge to an earlier time in Scrooge's life when he was a young, happy, and actually nice man, a cheerful guy. He had a sensitive side, and we see that he is engaged to this lovely woman named Belle. But as time progresses and they get closer to the day of the wedding, Scrooge is becoming more and more concerned about marrying Belle because Belle has no dowry. And by now, Scrooge is into making money, and he kind of knows, or he thinks at least, you need money to make money. Belle is not going to help me in that department. She realizes what's happening, and to her credit, she releases Scrooge from his obligation to marry her. And back in 19th century England, it was very, very difficult to break an engagement without suffering legal consequences. One way was for the woman to release the man from the engagement commitment. So that's what Belle does. And from a Buddhist perspective, she has generated good karma by doing this generous act, which she did not have to do, to benefit Scrooge. And we also learned that Belle went on to marry someone else and to live very happily. Again, from the Buddhist perspective, this could be karma ripening in favor of a good life for Belle. We don't know that for a fact, but that certainly is one interpretation of what we see. So the ghost of Christmas passed, returns Scrooge to his bedchamber, and about an hour later, another ghost appears, the ghost of Christmas Present. And this ghost takes Scrooge to the home of Bob Cratchit on Christmas Day. And Scrooge sees a very happy family gathered around a table with some food, not a lot of food, but some food, enough to make them happy that this will be their Christmas dinner. And we see Bob Cratchit walk in the door. He has just come home from church, and he has a young boy on his shoulder who we learn is Tiny Tim, who is crippled and who needs a little crutch to walk around, which is hanging on the wall. And at this point, Bob Cratchit turns to his wife and tells her something Tiny Tim said to him on the way home from church. And Tiny Tim said, and I quote, "He hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see." From a Buddhist perspective, Tiny Tim is a pure vision, a pure image, a pure spirit of compassion. Compassion, having a love for other people. Compassion, having a cherishing of other people. There is no attachment that is made by Tiny Tim to this conditional love. He just feels that he wants to do something good for others, and he has no sorrow, no regret, notwithstanding the fact that he has significant health and physical limitations. At this point, the ghost of Christmas Present takes Trump to the home of Fred during their Christmas celebration with family and friends, and everybody looks very jovial. But then Scrooge hears some of these people make sarcastic, negative remarks about the old curmudgeon Scrooge. Fred will not hear of it. He immediately jumps to Scrooge's defense and says, "I feel sorry for my uncle. He is a very sad and unfortunate person." From the Buddhist perspective, nephew Fred also is a spirit of pure compassion for others. He's not looking down, he's not on his uncle, he's not regretting his relationship with his uncle. He loves his uncle, and he doesn't want others to hurt his uncle by saying words that he thinks are inappropriate. So at this point, the ghost of Christmas Present departs the scene. And now, Scrooge, in fact, is getting more and more distraught. He doesn't like the things he's beginning to see. These are not complimentary about him. And in fact, he doesn't even know where he is at the moment. And then he sees the third and last ghost, which is the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And that ghost doesn't really speak. He kind of points in order to take Scrooge to various locations. And the first place that the ghost of Christmas yet to come takes Ebenezer Scrooge is again to the home of the Cratchit family. But this time the family is very sad and forlorn as they sit around their Christmas table, and Scrooge notices Tiny Tim is not there. And Tiny Tim's little crutch is not hanging on the wall. And Scrooge realizes Tiny Tim has died. Now Scrooge has become very, very distressed by this. Yes, uncharacteristic of him at one point, but not now. So from the Cratchit home, the ghost of Christmas yet to come takes Scrooge to a room where there are some businessmen who have assembled, and they're debating whether or not to go to this funeral of a person whose name isn't mentioned. And finally they decide, well, they'll go, but only if lunch is provided to them. And Scrooge realizes they're talking about his funeral. Now he is even more distressed. There's one more stop. The ghost of Christmas yet to come now takes Scrooge to a cemetery. Scrooge is shaking because he knows what he's probably going to see. And the ghost of Christmas yet to come takes Scrooge to a tombstone that is overgrown with weeds. It's a very, very neglected grave. Scrooge is hoping it's not going to be what he thinks it is, but he has to see for himself, and as he pushes the overgrowth aside, he sees that the name on the tombstone says Ebenezer Scrooge. At this point, Scrooge is overwhelmed with all of the results of his failings that he didn't perceive as failings throughout his life. And he engages in promising, in swearing that from henceforth he will change his ways, and as he puts it, change the shadows of what may be. This is the most important point in the story from the Buddhist perception, perspective. It is, from a Buddhist perspective, something called renunciation. Renunciation is a way, Buddha taught us, that we can decrease the amount of negative karma that we have built up. And which is obviously a very good thing because it's not going to ripen in a way that could be harmful or uncomfortable for us, and it's not going to be part of the decision-making process, if you will, as to what realm we'll go into after we leave the human realm. So from a Buddhist perspective, how does one do renunciation? You have to honestly acknowledge that you have engaged in certain non-meritorious actions. And then you have to vow not to do those non-meritorious actions in the future. And this is exactly what Ebenezer Scrooge has now done. So, from a Buddhist perspective, all of that unhappiness that had been caused by negative karma is going away. Now, the rest of the story you all know. I mean, Scrooge wakes up, he thinks it's Christmas Day, he's not quite sure, he opens the window and the window shutter and shouts out to a young boy down below, "What day is it?" And the boy yells back, "Why, it's Christmas Day, sir." And of course, at that point, Scrooge tells the boy to go to the poulterer's store and ask the poulterer to bring that prize turkey, which is still hanging in the window, to Scrooge's house. And that happens. And Scrooge tells the poulterer, after paying him, to take the turkey to the Cratchit home. But don't tell the Cratchit family who paid for the turkey. The Buddhist perspective on this is twofold. On the one hand, yes, Ebenezer Scrooge has done an act of kindness, an act of charity for those who are less fortunate and could not otherwise have afforded this turkey. That generates positive karma. Also, because he is cherishing others in the process, he is lowering his self-cherishing and thereby elevating his sense of happiness. But he goes one important step further. He does it anonymously. And when you do something anonymously in this situation, you're absolutely positively keeping self-cherishing out of the picture. There are people who will make donations, but then they hope that and expect that their names are going to be advertised to those around as being a donor. And that's self-cherishing, kind of in a sneaky way, getting back into the picture. And that might decrease or diminish the level of reduction in self-cherishing that you were hoping to get, or would have gotten no matter whether you were hoping to get it or not. But Scrooge does it the right way. He gifts somebody with a charitable action and does it anonymously. Then he goes on to his nephew Fred's home, which is now in the process of having the Christmas party. And when he walks in, of course, nephew Fred is shocked to see Scrooge, and so are all of the guests. They're shocked to see the curmudgeon of old Scrooge showing up. Wait, Scrooge isn't a curmudgeon anymore. He's a joyful, happy person who walks in laughing and asking people how are they, wishing them Merry Christmas, wanting to join in the games and songs that are going on. People are kind of shocked. What's the Buddhist perspective? This is no surprise. No surprise at all, because Scrooge has engaged in the action of renunciation. He has renounced his bad deeds. He has gotten rid of an awful lot of bad karma. In the process, he has significantly decreased his level of self-cherishing. He's now cherishing others more, and cherishing other people more is a surefire antidote, so Buddha told us. It's a surefire antidote to decreasing your self-cherishing and increasing your level of happiness. And now we see Ebenezer Scrooge, as demonstrating the perfect example of what Buddha has taught. I don't know if Charles Dickens had any knowledge of Buddhism, but boy, A Christmas Carol really is a primer on a lot of stuff that Buddha has taught. What's the takeaway here? I would submit the takeaway is that from the Western perspective, compassion, charity are wonderful virtues because they help other people. Even if that charity or compassion is mental on our part, it's intended to help other people. We have a food bank barrel outside intending to help other people. From a Buddhist perspective, yes, all of that is completely true, but there is another element to demonstrating compassion, practicing compassion, thinking compassion to others. It also redounds to our benefit, because what it does is to decrease our sense of cherishing others. It decreases our self-cherishing because we are cherishing others. And in the process of decreasing our sense of self-cherishing, it's elevating our sense of happiness. And of course, there's the religious aspect of cherishing others. We are increasing our positive karmic accounts, which are going to be useful when they ripen, or perhaps when it's time for us to move on to another realm. We probably want to stay in the human realm, but maybe we are so good we might actually have a chance of going up to a higher realm. Just saying. So, Charles Dickens concludes A Christmas Carol with these wonderful words. Quote, "He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well if any man alive possessed the knowledge." May that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. And if I may add, may God bless all of you, and may all of you have just a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Absolutely wonderful. We look forward to your next arrival to be with us again. And so now we're going to move into our tithes and offerings. And we invite you to take your tithes and gifts in your hands and bless them as the ushers come forth. In following the tithes and offerings, we're going to be having something very special before we hear from our Carol and the Goodfellows. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's all pray. Infinite radiant source of all life, we give thanks for the opportunity to share from our wealth of abundance, knowing that as we give, all others are blessed as well. And we acknowledge that divine love moving in and through each and every one of us blesses and multiplies all that we have, all that we give, and all that we receive. And so it is. Amen. Thank you. Amen. And as I mentioned before, we're going to have some wonderful, after the service on Christmas Eve, but also today we'll be having some refreshments in the lobby as well. And I want to thank those who have done the baking throughout this Christmas season. Thank you for those of you who have brought goodies for us to enjoy. And of course, in the back, we'll be having some back there as well. So for those of you who are joining us for the Metaphysical Forum. So as the tithes and offerings are being collected, we do invite those also on social media that if you're watching our website, there's a donate button there that you can also press. And as the Spirit guides you, we invite you to share from your storehouse of abundance as well. And those of you who are on YouTube, then you can actually log on to our website, which is www.tlgtemple.org, and then we can donate that way. Okay, so thank you in advance. And so now, for those of you who, I hope everybody received a ticket, an orange ticket, yes? Anybody that didn't receive an orange ticket?
This one needs no introduction. Sing along, 'cause I know you know the words.
Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful Happy Sunday, everyone.